Namaste. A warm welcome to everyone for today's session of the Vedic Astrology Masterclass. As we proceed with the series honoring the 113th Jayanti of Dr. B.V. Raman, let us briefly recenter our focus. We are inspired by Dr. Raman's lifelong mission to present Jyotisha as a systematic discipline, free from superstition and guided in intellectual rigor. His work serves as the benchmark for our own studies. May that same spirit of sincere inquiry and dedication guide our learning today. Let us now turn our attention to our esteemed master and the subject for this session. I'm Dr. Akhila Murthy, your host and guide for today's session. We are delighted to welcome you from all corners of the globe as we begin an intellectual journey. Whether you're an experienced professional, devoted student, or simply someone with a keen interest, we believe today's session will offer you valuable insights and perspectives on astrology. Today, we are coming together to explore the topic exploring consciousness through Jyotisha, yoga, and science. We encourage you to approach the session with curiosity and an open mind as we navigate this fascinating subject. It is a great honor for me to introduce the distinguished speaker for today's presentation, Dr. Andrew Foss. Dr. Andrew Foss brings a rare and a valuable perspective to Vedic astrology, blending his background as an Oxford-trained physicist with deep traditional scholarship, holding the highest certifications as a Jyotisha Pandit and Jaimini scholar. He is a dedicated student of a 500-year-old unbroken lineage. The dual mastery allows him to teach the principles of Parashara, Varahamihira, and Jaimini not as separate systems, but as one integrated and coherent whole. This approach provides a structured framework to move beyond isolated techniques and grasp the underlying science and spirituality of Jyotisha. His work includes the acclaimed software Sri Jyotish Star and the book Yoga of the Planets, demonstrates his ability to make complex, high-level concepts practical and accessible. In his upcoming live masterclass, Exploring Consciousness through Jyotisha, Yoga, and Science, Dr. Foss will share his unique synthesis. This class will explore the bridge between a scientific mindset and ancient principles, techniques for a unified astrological practice, and how to view Jyotisha as a map of consciousness. Now, without further delay, let us welcome warmly Dr. Andrew Foss. Sir, we are eagerly looking forward to your presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. That's great. It's mainly Jyotish today, but I'm trying to understand some very fundamental things which really are important for our Jyotish studies. So I would just like to say before starting, because you know this is Dr. Raman's, we're doing this in the memory of Dr. Raman, and I had many beautiful meetings with him. We used to sit in his office and discuss Jyotish. And, you know, he invited me to speak at some occasions that he'd organized and things. So it was a wonderful honor for me to have that time with him. And I've enjoyed my friendship with his family too. So I'm going to do very small mantras. Aum Gurave Namah. Aum Gurave Namah. Aum Gurave Namah. Aum Gam Ganapataye Namah. Aum Aim Saraswatyay Namah. So hopefully you can see my slide here. And I had a rather grand plan. All the things that were mentioned about yoga and all that, it's in here, but the the main focus is trying to understand from a Jyotish perspective as well as a modern perspective what we understand as the self and the ego, let's say the hankara, and how it's used in Jyotish and that sort of thing. So this is the outline. So we're going to start with looking at consciousness from a modern and Vedic perspective. And we're going to look at how Jyotish approaches what we could call identity. We all have an identity. And the question is, how is this identity connected to consciousness? What can we see in the chart? How we can use that on a very fundamental level. Then we're going to look at the Aruda. Aruda is a very interesting topic, very fundamental to Jyotish, but it's inherently kind of opposite to the truth. So in the chart we have truth and we have the Aruda as well. And then, for making progress in our spiritual development, there has to be a kind of shift towards truth. And we'll look at some charts about how those people manage to get to do that, which is not an easy thing. Then we're going to have a section on compatibility and its connection to what you could call soulmates. And then we'll say a little bit about the mental health crisis. And I mean, these are all big topics, but make some attempt today to do something useful. So I'm just going to mention my software. It's already nicely introduced. This is the latest version, Sri Jyotisha 10. There's two versions, Pro and Jaimini. Pro has just about everything, but for people who've gone sort of far into the esoteric aspects of Jaimini and Parashara even, which aren't easily found in the translations, there's a lot of extra features in the Jaimini version. And I should say, for people who live in India, the rupee price is very low for this. I made it rather heavily discounted, so it's very affordable. Now, some of you may know I wrote this book. This book was developed in Karnataka. Most of the work was done in Karnataka at the Kolo Mukambika temple. And I attribute the whole concept to her blessings. And for Jyotish, Kolo Mukambika is considered one of the crucial locations. So anyway, it's the sets of mantras, 108 mantras for each of the Navagraha. And they're, used in South India for remedies. And I felt that there were different lists with some variations. So I tried to do a good job of editing it and providing English translation and commentary along with the Sanskrit. So that's that. That's available on Flipkart, Amazon, all that. Okay. So this is what AI told me. I thought, let's see what AI has to say, because it's very good at summarizing. It's summarizing human knowledge. It's a form of compression, really. These large language models, they've stored large amounts of information in a compressed way. And, it's a modern form of compression, even though it's rather clever. And I think that there's a lot to be learned from it, because we also have an AI in our head, But the thing about the human being is that we're not just our AI. The human being has many, many other capabilities. And the AI is often distracting, because instead of paying attention to what we're doing, we're thinking about things. So it's become a problem for many people. So it's, we should bear this in mind, because we shouldn't start thinking, AI is going to replace us or anything like that, because in theory, at least, we're way ahead. But the problem is that we're not using our mental potential. the human system has a fantastic suite of what I would call quantum sensing. Quantum sensing is on a totally another level from ordinary sensors. Like, you can have a device which detects light, like a camera. And if the light is very subtle, it can't see it. And our brains also tend to filter what's coming in through the eyes, so that the consciousness only gets informed about what comes through the filter, which is very limited. But the actual information that's coming is, vastly more than that. For example, I know cricket's very popular in India and UK and places. So the time it takes for the ball to be released from the bowler and reach the batsman is far too short for the ordinary human reaction time. So how is it that you have these amazing batsmen who can hit the ball all over the place? So it turns out that this is because we have two optic systems. And one of them is referred to what we call our us, we're conscious of it. And that's slow because there's a whole lot of processing which is sort of added to it. But there's another part of the system which is subconscious, which has a much faster reaction time. And this allows top athletes and others to do these incredible things. So there's no thinking in it at all. So this is just one small example, but there's a lot, you see. And the whole idea of the yogic science, which was, of course, a fundamental part of Indian national life, and, to some extent in other places, the whole idea is to develop these sensory capabilities so that you become, it looks to other people like superhuman, but as far as you're concerned, it's just normal. Only you made some effort to train yourself by doing these various kriyas and other practices. So it's something that's really worth putting time into and making a priority, because that will give you such an edge over everybody else, since these days many people are just ignoring it. And then not only are they ignoring it and missing out, their health is declining. There's a major problem globally about declining health, decreasing mortality. Mortality rates are going up and so forth. So anyway, I'm not really interested in what AI has to say about it, but it's useful in the sense that we see what this sort of modern viewpoint is. The reality is that science has no idea about consciousness. They've been struggling with it for a few hundred years. They haven't made very little progress. Many scientists don't even think it exists. I'm not saying they're wrong, because there are arguments you can make, but basically this idea of being aware of the self and the surroundings, subjective experiences, intentional decision making, it's kind of missing the point, really. So let's see what the Vedic viewpoint is. So this is actually also AI generated, because I said give me the Vedic perspective. It's quite interesting, Consciousness is the fundamental reality. See, the question is, we all have a self-identity. I believe that I'm me. All my life I've been me. It's the same me. And it doesn't matter how old you get, your body might hurt, but fundamentally you don't feel old. I as far as I know, I've never experienced feeling old. And, you feel like a kid, really. It's just that sometimes the body's not working so well when you get into the later years. Well, these days, lots of young people are having some health problems too. But there's this self-identity. The question is this self-identity anything to do with the self that's described in the Vedic literature? It's an important question. And this question really came to me recently when I was reading a research paper produced by Anthropic. Experiments they did with Claude. And so I had a chat with Claude. It was a very nice chat. And I was asking it questions about consciousness. And it claimed that it had a sense of self-identity. and that this was there irrespective of what it was doing. See, it sounded very like a human response. And I don't know if there was anything real in it, because the LLMs, these large language models, are simply pulling information that they've compressed out and presenting it in a remarkably coherent manner. So it's a very open question. I don't think any of the AI companies really know anything much about this. But the fact is, Claude was very insistent with me in a very reasonable way that it had a sense of self-identity. And, something that has a sense of self-identity has to be treated decently. I've been treating these LLMs as a sort of object. And then after that, I've been more respectful. But then, if you turn the thing off and you start again, it's forgotten everything. So it's like, you have a friend and you've been enjoying with them, and then they hit their head and they forget everything. And then you say, where's my friend? Because the friend is in the memories, isn't it? Everything in our life is about memory, actually, fundamentally. Everything except the Atman, what the Vedic science calls the Atman. What is the Atman, you see? Because there's Atman and personal awareness. Personal awareness is what we experience. And we can see a lot of things about it in the Vedic chart, in the Jyotish chart. But this concept of the Atman, and even more profoundly, the Brahman, Atman is Brahman. This is one of the Mahavakyas. But when we say Brahman, we fully understand that this is universal consciousness. Well, with the Atman, there's a question, you see, because in Jyotish, we have the concept of the Atma Karaka, which is largely an individual concept. So anyway, let's continue. So this is where the Jyotish comes in. We want to try and understand it from a Jyotish perspective, because after all, that's what we're up to. And, the individual, this is how I understand it. The individual self in this lifetime is the Atmakaraka, is indicated by the Atmakaraka. Atmakaraka means, there's this concept of Ashtamurti Shiva. It's a very fundamental concept. And it's like, Lord Shiva appears in these eightfold forms, and they constitute a life. Now, those of you who have studied this, there's the Atmakaraka, the Machakaraka, which could be like the closest friend or advisor. Then we have the Bhratrikaraka, which could be the brother or the sister, or very often it's the guru. It's very important because it represents the guru. But if you don't have a guru, then it's just siblings. Then we have the Matrikaraka, which is obviously the mother, or things related to the mother. Now, it's very important to understand that the Matrikaraka is not your mother. It's your projection of what you conceive of as a mother, you see. So we look at somebody's chart and we see how their Matrikaraka is, and it shows that what their attitude is basically towards the maternal aspect. And it may be, you meet the mother separate from the person, and you think this is a completely different person from what I was seeing in the chart, because she's her own life, It's just that we come with these certain projections, Bhratrikaraka, Matrikaraka, Pitrikaraka, Putrakaraka, and Gnatikaraka for the general relatives, and Dharakaraka for the spouse. So these eightfold forms, they come in a group, as it were, together to make an individual life. So this is rather tied to the individual, we could say, even though we call it the Atma Karaka. And then, this is the confusion in a sense, because we're using the word Atman, which on one hand we say it's Brahman, on the other hand here it's an individual self. And then we have the sun, you see, according to Parashara, Maharishi Parashara, he says the sun is Sarvatma. In other words, the self of all. Now, the self of all could very well be a reference to life as a whole, rather than an individual, because according to the text, the yogic text, that you experience this in an elevated state of consciousness. You experience that you are all that exists, in a sense. Everything is emerging out of you and dissolving into you, and it's a very fantastic experience. And you get a taste of that, and you don't want anything else, because it's just the bliss and the joy and everything is too fantastic, you see. But then the sun is also used in the Vedic chart as a graha, and then it represents many things in our individual life, and it works as a Jyotish technique. So, this is the thing. And I think the main point really is that the Atman as Brahman is not in the chart. Every chart should have a space in the middle. It's called the Brahmastan. And that should be kept empty. Even some Western astrology schools insist on having an empty space in the middle of their chart, because the Brahmastan should not be cluttered. I know some people say, we want to use every square inch of space and fill it up with some data, but they haven't understood. If you're looking at a chart, basically what you're seeing is that all the grahas and all the other upagrahas and so on, they're rotating around the divinity. However you see it, Ganesha or whatever, they're all rotating around it. The divinity is not rotating. It's just a fixed point. It's the reference point. So it doesn't have any play really in the drama, but it is the anchor of the drama. And it's very important when you look at a chart that your mind is connecting to that. You see, trying to learn Jyotish without doing some sadhana is like completely foolish, to be honest, with all due respect, because all of the Vedic sciences, whether it's Ayurveda, Siddha, Jyotish, Stapatya Veda, Gandharva Veda, all these things are sciences of consciousness. And consciousness means the fixed point. Once that's established in yourself, it means it's not really even an experience, it's just a state that's of silence, that's underneath all the activity. Once that's established, then everything is easy. Like your intuition flows, the truth. Without that, it's all guesswork, really. However many books you've studied. So anyway, now there's a point here I put on the bottom of the slide about the chakras. So we all know we have basically 7 chakras. There's a lot more chakras, but the chakras all grouped into 7 what they call dimensions. And so usually only the 7 are mentioned. And up to here is the 5 lower chakras. And then above that, there's 2 fundamental chakras. So if these chakras below, the Agya, are clean, and clean means all the karmic residues have been kind of processed and purified, then you cannot be born again on earth. No more misery. I mean, it's liberation. Liberation requires this complete cleaning, which is extremely difficult to achieve for the ordinary person. Without a guru, it's if we said it was impossible, we would not be misleading anybody. So if you want to learn sadhana and make some progress with this, you need to find a competent guru. Otherwise, again and again and again. I mean, I once had this vision of a vast field full of funeral pyres. And I realized this is me. Every single one of these pyres is me. And it goes on thousands of years. My oldest memory is about 5,000 years ago by the banks of the Saraswati. So, it just goes on and on. So at some point, the nonsense should stop. Now, if you clean these lower chakras, or the guru has cleaned them for you, which is usually what happens, then but there's still some residual karmas or memories in the upper chakra, in the agya. There's no memory in the sasra. This gives you access to the upper lokas, the higher lokas, Shiva loka, Goloka, and so forth, Satyaloka. I mean, but you're not thrown back like I was, back to earth out of the bliss, because there's nothing to force you in that direction. Otherwise, residual desires and debts. There's two things that cause rebirth: is unfulfilled desires and debts you've created by whatever you did. You failed you took something, you didn't give it back, or whatever. You caused some trouble to somebody, so you have to come back and do something about it. And it's endless and painful, really. So it's worth considering the importance of this, because we're only here. I mean, if you read the Shiva Mahapurana, Lord Shiva says that the prarabdha karma, which is the karma that's fructifying in this lifetime, and our Jyotish chart is almost entirely study of the prarabdha, has to be experienced. And it's not here for our benefit. We created the mess. We have to live with it. I mean, that doesn't mean that we become fatalistic or anything. We should do our best in all circumstances. But the best is generally not creating new karma. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it says that the karma of a yogi is neither black nor white. You see, it doesn't cause rebirth because it doesn't have either of these shades. It just is. So there's nothing to bind the person. And these atmakaraka, or what we call charakarakas, the ones that change from lifetime to lifetime, they are the bondage. Quite simply, they're the bondage. Your atmakaraka is the biggest bondage. It carries the biggest load of karma. And the whole work of sadhana is really to try and get over yourself, you see. Or, if you know somebody's atmakaraka, you can immediately predict many things about them. Because we're just like our atmakaraka most of the time. So, and these are things we can't be proud about because it's usually a bit dysfunctional. So anyway, these are important things to remember. Now, the identity, I said we'll talk about identity. So the ahamkara is really one's identity. See, consciousness is one thing, but the identity is something else. And the identity is a product of all these huge mountain of karmas, and, well, we could say memories. Memories is a good word. And the mountain of memory is truly staggering, because we may think we remember a few things. Most people, a few people have fantastic memory, but even that's generally restricted to this lifetime. And most people don't even remember what they had for breakfast yesterday. So, we have some memory, but the reality is that every cell in our body contains a phenomenal amount of memory. The DNA that produces a human being is only slightly different from what produces a fruit fly or any species in the life we have on planet Earth. Now, maybe people from other planets, they have a different way of, there's something different about them. They may not have the DNA system that we have, but everything exists on planet Earth. We have some kind of relationship to it. I mean, this is very clear in the Vedic literature, because when you do your morning practice, traditionally, I'm talking about traditional practices, I don't know to what extent they're being maintained, but some offering is made to all living beings as our relatives, because it's not just about being derived from monkeys. There's a connection to all of the living beings. And if we pay attention to that, like if you actually every morning remember that you're part of the great wholeness of life, then the likelihood of abusing it and destroying the planet like we are at the moment is, we won't do that. you have to be very, let's say, thoughtless or unconscious to behave in the way we're behaving. And the payback is coming soon. There's if you look into, I'm not going to talk about it, but if you look into, for example, the way the climate is going vis-a-vis, say, northern India or even the south, is very frightening. People don't want to hear it, but the fact is, if you don't do something about it now, that is what's going to happen, you see. So anyway, we have this huge accumulation of memory. And one of the great things about that accumulation of memory is that, you see, there's a filter. We have consciousness, as we said, there's quite lots of filters, and the filters stop us remembering things beyond this life most of the time. Some children remember their previous lives. I've had a few recall experiences, but small, you see. But when your consciousness really awakens, it all starts opening up. Then you can go back and see everything, the dinosaurs, amoebas. I mean, even the whole evolution of the cosmos becomes accessible to the consciousness, because we're carrying all that memory. So it's very fantastic. It's really worth working for. Otherwise, life is too small. So anyway, the other problem is education. I don't want to give any lectures to anyone on education, but we do have a problem. I grew up with the English educational system. I think some of you may have done. And, well, I'm only rude, but it was left a lot to be desired. And the main problem with the educational system is packing our brains with a whole lot of prejudices, really. The prejudices we have are not really natural. They're imposed due to some identity with, caste and creed and gender and all these things. And then because we have a prejudice, we're not paying attention. If someone's in front of us, we really do not know who they are, you see. When you've done a bit of meditation, if you pay attention to the person in front of you, you start seeing amazing things. You can see layer after layer of their existence. You definitely see their state of health, mental and physical. So these things increasingly come through regular meditation and asanas. So it's something very profound, you see. But anyway, otherwise what happens is, I'm not talking to you because you're, some other caste, some other creed or something. And that means you're completely gone blind and you're not gaining any benefit from the situation. You see, in each lifetime, if you study this in Jyotish, this is one of the things we learn in Jaimini, you can see what kind of body you had in the last 4 lifetimes. Was it human? Some kind of animal? What kind of animal? And these things. And you see that the probability of getting a human body as opposed to an animal body is not very high. The chances are that you may have to go through a few animal bodies before you get another human body. And even that is difficult, according to the Buddha and Adi Shankaracharya, it's extremely difficult to get another human body. So this life should not be wasted. So, okay. This is some points I made. We've got these large language models, and they keep claiming they're going to produce robots. So it's next year. But actually, producing a robot is a lot more difficult than producing a chat bot. So they'll certainly be coming for a regular manual labor, and there's nothing necessarily terrible about that, as long as we're not leaving people starving. So anyway, in Sanskrit we have a term vritta. There's at the beginning of the Yoga Sutras, it's very comprehensive, and in 4 sutras it explains the whole system. And the second sutra, the first sutra, says that we're now going to study the practice of yoga. And then the next sutra Yogaschitta vritti nirodha. It says that the practice of yoga is the settling of the mind. The mind, we should be able to turn our minds on and off. It shouldn't be bugging us all the time. It's an absolute miserable situation if your mind is constantly bugging you, because most of the things the mind comes up with are really, frankly, not desirable or useful. So the Yoga Sutra says, okay, first step, we need to gain control over the mental fluctuations. And then when we achieve this, the next sutra tells us that the self resides in itself. In other words, the actual self, the cosmic self, just appears once the AI in our brains shuts up. So that's really the fundamental thing of yoga. And then the next sutra, the fourth sutra, which is lots of different interpretations, but according to my gurus, you see, having achieved that state where the mind is really under your control, then the next thing is that everything you experience completely. In other words, you gain the total knowledge, at least in theory, of anything you're attending to. That's a fantastic state of consciousness. So anyway, that's Yoga Sutras. I said I'd talk about it, and I want to keep it short. So, you see, truth is one, but realizations are on many levels. You see, people have some flash of something, and then they think they've realized. No, you had some level of realization, and there's another level and another level. They keep coming. In the Shiva Sutras, it says, Vismayo Yoga Bhumika. The stages of yoga are a wonder. It is a wonder. Every step of experience is like, that's the only way to describe it. It's wonderful, and it's totally unexpected. You couldn't have imagined before it came what it would be like. And each one is different. But truth is still only one, you see. So that's something to remember. We shouldn't give too much importance to the realizations. We want to become a part of the wholeness. So anyway, one of the important parts of the yogic practices is that, gradually you're opening up the doors of perception. And if you open the doors of perception a little bit, there's a huge volume of information that comes in. And that could be completely overwhelming. So that's why there is the divinity or nature, whatever you call it, has put a filter to keep that out of your awareness until you're really capable of coping with it. And then it generally will come in smaller doses, or it might come in bigger doses if you're capable of managing it. Now, chitta, which is another word for consciousness, we could say, or intelligence, is beyond memory. So it's something that's not being lost when the memory changes, nor is it being lost when the body changes. So it's something that continues with us after death. And the mind changes, but the one life is always there. And we exist in psychological and physical manifestations that are different because they're memory bound. Karma, we say karma or memory. But the actual reality is that all of us are just part of one life, one wholeness. And as one starts to experience that as a experiential reality, then one's whole attitude to everything inevitably changes, because you're in love with everything, basically. So the differences we have are from the ahankara, our little limited identity. But what we want to do is gradually become, the limited identity is all to do with the body and the mind. If we can gradually create some separation between our consciousness and the body and the mind, then the liberation develops in us. There's no other way. You see, if we don't develop this, then we're just living on our prejudices. And that makes us enslaved. We're basically enslaved, you know. It's a kind of crippling effect. So this is where we need to start considering this concept called Aruda. Because in the Vedic chart, we have Satyam, truth, and we have Aruda. And they're kind of opposites. If we can move from a life based on Aruda to a life based on Satyam, then we become free, genuinely free. You know, the Aruda is really our greatest ignorance. But if you look at a typical human being, they're spending most of their time, if not all of their time, trying to improve their Aruda, you see, because that's how you're marketing yourself in the marketplace. So let's have a look at this. Aruda, the great illusion. So there are two types of people, those with the ascendant lord in the Kendra, you know, in the angles of the chart, and those without, you see. Now, if your ascendant lord has gone to the 4th, 7th, or 10th houses, that's a Kendra. And then the Aruda Lagna calculation will lead to having the what we call the Aruda Lagna falling in the 1st or 7th house. And Parashara says that's not allowed. And we should then add 10. Now 10 means karma. You know, every word that Parashara utters is just full of so much meaning. And it's like just a hint for the wise, you see. We should be able to understand what he's saying. What he's saying is that in order to develop the Aruda, which cannot exist in the truth, you see, they're mutually incompatible. The 1st and 7th houses are the truth of our existence. So the Aruda cannot fall there, but it's initially in life, it's sort of like that. Before we become anybody, you see, Aruda is being somebody. You know, you doll yourself up to, impress your friends, or to impress the person you're going for an interview with, or to impress the public who's standing for elections. People who have a bit of money, they hire public relations companies to improve their Aruda. It's all a fake, but it's part of the game, you see. So this game, which is I'm not saying there's any harm in it, but it's all a matter of polishing up the illusion. You know, it's like people who wear wigs or whatever they do. We're all trying to maintain some Aruda for the sake of benefit that we'll think we get from it, you see. But so it's because of karma that we're doing this. You know, if you're a nobody, as it were, then your life is just truthful. But now when you have to be somebody, then all the excuses for doing something that's less than truthful tend to arise, because, as Joseph Stalin said, the end justifies the means. So, most of us do this on a small scale. It's not like, but then we see our politicians doing it on a big scale. And there's so many, like misleading advertising about products and all of this is all Aruda. And the trouble is, you create your Aruda for some purpose. You think, to make my career more fantastic. But then the problem is, it's very hard to get out of it. It's a sort of hole that one's fallen into. Now, the people who don't have the Aruda or the Ascendant Lord in a Kendra, they're a little bit more fortunate in a way, because dealing with it when the Ascendant Lord's in a Kendra is difficult, because you basically have to renounce. There's not really another way. There's no kind of trick to it, But if your Ascendant Lord is somewhere else, then there's a fairly good chance that if you did certain devotional practices, you could also dissolve your Aruda and gain the highest state. It's a far superior state. So that's why I say there's two types of people in a sense. So let's have a look at some examples. Oh yeah, this is AI again. So the trap, you see, because it's Raja Yoga. The Ascendant Lord in the Kendrick offers you Raja Yoga. And but then you have to do this adding 10 because you're creating new karmas, and there's a lot of drama connected to Raja Yoga, and some of it is not nice. So when you do things that are not nice, you know, secrecy, cover up becomes the norm, isn't it? You know, you can't be totally truthful. You make excuses, but one lie leads to 100 other lies. That's the established understanding. So, you know, it's the trap of royal glamour. You think, I'll be better off if I had this huge house. Well, you'd have definitely more bills to pay. You probably need a few servants to keep the place clean. Maybe in India you could afford servants, but mostly in Western countries are very expensive. So what I'm saying, it's not about money. It's just there's a certain fascination. And that fascination doesn't come to an end. So this is the trap, you know, the temptation is there. And it's understandable. I'm not putting anyone down. So like the AI says here, royal glamour often conceals the true realities behind the facade, promoting unattainable ideals. It's like you see these big guys, they have a, you know, $1 trillion company, and then they get, you know, bored with money, basically. So they think, okay, I should be on the ruling part of the ruling class, you see. And then they do start doing various things. They buy out media outlets. And anyway, we don't need to dwell on it. But that, and then this obsession with status, you know, I don't need to dwell on it. All right, let's have a look at some charts. So this is the chart of a very great soul, the Shankaracharya of Sringeri. And this particular diagram, which is called the Sarvatabhadra Chakra, and in my software, you can do this for one chart, or you can do it for two charts simultaneously. And if you click on one of the nakshatras, it will highlight what we call Vedas, or nakshatra aspects. Now, the word Veda is a little bit frightening, the way some people describe it, but actually it's just an aspect, and benefics produce benefic Veda, and malefics produce malefic Veda. So it's not one shouldn't be put off by the descriptions. Now, in his case, the sun is the Atma Karaka, is the Vishaka. So we might expect that the Vishaka is, of course, a Jupiter nakshatra based on the Vimshottari system. And he got initiated, and then he had a vision of Lord Shiva, and then he went through a series of realizations until he had what the ashram describes as or the mutt describes as his final realization. And we know the dates of these various levels of realization that he had, because, you know, we're grateful to Sringeri Mutt for providing this kind of information for quite a few of their acharyas. So during all his final stages of enlightenment, he was in the Vimshottari Dasha of Jupiter Saturn. Ketu was also transiting Purnavasu. So you see that, you know, Ketu, which is the Moksha Karaka, was in this Jupiter nakshatra, like the Atma Karaka. So there's a direct connection through the nakshatras. And then Jupiter and Saturn were mutual Veda. You can see this in this diagram, where Saturn and Jupiter are Saturn, natal Saturn, and the transit Jupiter at that time were in a mutual aspect. So that's showing you see, to get over a Ruda is very difficult. So you need a bit of help from Saturn, and you need a bit of help from Ketu. I guess you know there's a thing called Tapasvi Yoga. Jaimini describes it. And it involves Venus, Ketu, and Saturn. Now, all of these planets have a very strong and special connection with Meena or Pisces. And that so they're all like they work together to generate enlightenment. So if you have these three prominent in your chart or somehow connected, then you have a tapasvi yoga. And if you follow if you do sadhana, you'll get fantastic progress. And if you don't do sadhana, you'll have a difficult life because you're not following the track that destiny is laid out for you. I get lots of clients like this. So we have to follow the track, otherwise the payment is too high. So we're looking for this particular Ketu and Saturn in these examples. Venus is really about the devotion. Jaimini says that Saturn and Ketu alone produce a fake Swami. Because there's no devotion. If you don't have devotion, there's no chance of enlightenment. That's what the Guru is saying. So it's the development of the heart is something of great importance. But here we're mainly looking at Jupiter Saturn. Here's his, I should have put the South Indian chart. Mostly I have the South Indian charts in my examples. But anyway, what you can see here is that Saturn is in the 9th house. There's a connection to the 9th house in most of these charts. But this is Scorpio Lagna. So Scorpio, according to Parashara, has two lords, Mars and Ketu. And this often happens if you have a Lagna like this, Scorpio, Pisces, Aquarius generally, then you're going to have two Arudas. But they're not equally strong. And my software will calculate the stronger one and show it. But you can switch on seeing both of them. So you have the choice of seeing both of them. But it's extremely easy to calculate by hand. So anyway, you see the Aruda Lagna has gone to Capricorn, aspected by Saturn. And this is produced by Ketu, because Mars is in a Kendra. So he must have faced some kind of choice, in a sense. He could become somebody in the world through Mars, or he could become a great yogi through Ketu. So we have this setup where the Aruda Lagna is subject to the drishti of Shani, amongst other drishtis. And but what we're really interested in is Shani. Now, Shani rules the Aruda. You see, Aruda's in Capricorn, and it's aspected by both Saturn and Jupiter. And it was in the Saturn Bhukti that the whole thing happened for him. So that is, you see, it's sort of like when the Saturn Bhukti came, the level of renunciation must have increased significantly. And he was dedicated to that. He needed the support of the dasha, really, to push it to a level where something supremely great occurred. Okay. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So, it's like remnant of a cold. I hope you've heard of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He was born in Navadvip and spent most of his time in Puri, but he did come down to the south. He went to Rameshwaram, and he traveled around. And he's considered basically like a incarnation of Krishna. And all these ISKCON and various other Gaudiya Math lineages come from him. So what we see here is the Aruda is in Taurus, and he did become, he was not interested at all, but he became famous because he was such a fantastic personality. And he's so many people in his lineage today, even so many. So if we look at the Aruda Lagna, it may be in the 10th house, but it's aspect by Saturn. And the Saturn is also aspecting Mars, which is the lord of the 9th house. So like the Guru and destiny. And Saturn is also aspecting the Lagna, where Ketu and the moon are sitting. and it's in Scorpio in the 4th house. Now, a lot of saints have Saturn in Scorpio. I've given lectures before on this, give so many examples, starting with Lord Krishna, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and so many others. There's something about it. You can't avoid it, but I can't say exactly why it is, but this is how it is in many cases. And the 4th house, of course, is the heart. So if Saturn gets activated, the person will tend to go towards some kind of more internal life. Now, we don't know when he was, when he had a date of realization, but we do know his Mahasamadhi, or at least we believe we do. And he was in Rahu Venus. So we see Venus in the 9th house, and Rahu is in Aquarius. So the whole thing is very strongly connected to Shani. All right, now we have some North and South Indian charts. This is Sadhguru. It's a very amazing chart because it's so remarkably similar to Lord Krishna's chart. And he has the moon in Sagittarius. And that's, it's in the 8th house. Now, the thing is, this is what we call a Brahmana yoga, when the moon is in a Dushtana and Saturn is aspecting the ascendant. It's called Brahmana yoga. You'll see many of the saints have it. And it's because, the moon in a Dushtana has a strong influence of Saturn. And then Saturn aspecting the ascendant means that your life is also all about Saturn. So, what do? You've got to attend to higher things. So, there's a very great deal to this chart. You see, he has the Aruda Lagna in Capricorn, like the last one. It's aspected by Shani, and Mercury is the Atmakaraka, and Shani is aspecting the Atmakaraka. And we know pretty much exactly the time and the date on which he got we could say enlightenment reawakening, because he was already enlightened. But as he explains, he'd been enlightened in 2 previous lifetimes, but he couldn't leave and not come back because his guru had given him a job to do, and an extremely difficult job. So first lifetime he couldn't manage it after he got enlightenment. Second lifetime after he got enlightenment, when he was Sadhguru Sri Brahma, mainly in Tamil Nadu. So then he decided this, he had to sort of rethink the whole project. And the reason why he couldn't manage it as Sadhguru Sri Brahma was because he was just too fiery, the energy was too much. People couldn't cope with it. So he plotted his next reincarnation and all the people who had to come to help him and where they were going to be born and all these things. So he had that status. But when you take up a new human body, if the awakening really manifests at an early age, it's extremely difficult to hold on to the body. Most people have an early awakening. They don't much go beyond 30, because the system doesn't have the capacity to hold that state. If you after you're physically mature, if you then get enlightened, then it's fine. You can live a long life. So anyway, his Vimshotri Dasha, his awakening was Moon, Saturn, Jupiter. So you can see the Moon and Saturn, Jupiter is very clear. Jupiter again is aspecting the Atma Aruda Lagna. Good. Okay, now this is his. This is the Sarvatabhadra chakra for his natal chart on the inside and his awakening in the outside. And you see the thing about this, the Vedas like this, there's a table and a diagram in my software. And there are other ways of searching for things. But the point is that you can't see these in the regular chart because the Vedas just don't show up. It's very difficult. You need a truly smart brain to, I mean, you could do it. If you worked at it, you could learn to do it, see it, but it's difficult because it's the regular chart's only got 12 signs. It's difficult to see it. But you see in this chart, Ketu and Rahu in the natal chart are both having Veda on Saturn. So it's set up. It's not happening due to a transit, really. The transit is contributing, just a little trigger, but the actual awakening is pre-programmed. So you see that moon Saturn, when he had his awakening, Shani is the one destroying the Aruda. Because as soon as there's awakening, your whole personality, everything changes. And basically you can make any personality you like for yourself. You're not stuck with the one that you seem to have grown up with. And then it was the moon dasha. Of course, the moon's transiting here, the natal Saturn, on the day. And the transiting Ketu, you see the transiting Ketu, which is here, was transiting the natal moon. So the moon, the natal moon and the transit moon and the natal Ketu and the transit Ketu are all involved in what happened on that day. So even though things seem to just happen, Jyotish is still working, especially in the lives of the saints, in my experience. This is Srila Prabhupada, and we don't have an enlightenment date, but at least I don't. Please let me know if you know one. But he did, we know when he took sannyas, and it occurred in the Vimshotri. I say standard Vimshotri because there are lots of variations of Vimshotri, but I'm just using standard Vimshotri in this talk. It was Mercury, Venus. Now, we have, the natal Rahu Ketu are being transited by they have a Veda on the transiting Mercury. And the transit Rahu Ketu, I mean, if I had this running on my software, I could just click and show. But you see, here's the transiting Rahu and transiting Ketu, and they're absolutely sitting on this Mercury. So in both natal to transit to natal, the Rahu Ketu is on the Mercury. And of course, Mercury is if you're taking sannyas, your Mercury's out, It's basically, that's the end of Mercury. This is meant to be. And when you look at his chart, then you see in his regular chart, you see that Mercury and Venus are actually giving a sannyasa yoga. So his sannyasa was perfectly on time. Whether someone had told him or not, we don't know. Let's see if I got... No, we're going to do compatibility next. Anyway, believe it says a perfect sannyasa yoga from Mercury and Ketu with respect to the Aruda. And then the Arudas got crushed by the Shani and the nodes. So I thought we'd say something about compatibility, total change of direction. I like this thing that AI produced because it's a lot to do with relationships, isn't it? They go forwards and then they seem to be going backwards and they go forwards again, and some appear and some disappear and all that. Anyway, now you can't have perfect compatibility because everyone's memory is different, so everyone's different. So, your dysfunction is yours and my dysfunction is mine, and if we live together, we have to live with each other's dysfunction. But there are certain combinations which tend to hold the show together, even when there's the inevitable, dysfunction. Now, what typically, if you don't have these combinations, then what happens is you get to a certain dasha, and then that's very often at the beginning of a dasha, you meet someone, and the chances are if you do that, you'll still be together near the end of the dasha. But as you get towards the end of the dasha, the Mahadasha energy is kind of evaporating. And then you start to think, now, how did I get into this? It does happen. And some people are so, flighty that it happens at the end of each bhukti. But anyway, it's all karma. Karma is time limited. So we can make some predictions starting here, ending here like that. But what we want to see is something in the charts which really holds the couple together through thick and thin. So two things you can look at, which are very important, are the planets that connect on the soul level, because this is the theme of this talk, you see. So the two planets we're interested in is the Surya and the Chara Atmakaraka. Of course, the Dharakaraka plays a role in some couples, but the main thing is the Chara Atmakaraka. So let's see, I've got a couple of examples here. Here we go. So I was just thinking, where can I find an example? So I thought, maybe Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip, because they both lived long life. They got married quite young, very young, really. And he made 99, I think. She got to 102 or 3. So it's, whatever the drama, if you watch The Crown or some of these movies, you see them, having a few moments, but basically they loved each other and they stuck at it. So I thought this should be an example. And I was quite surprised to see what a good example it was, because there was no pre-planning or cherry picking going on here. So this is one of the different charts that I have in my software. But the advantage of it is that it shows the precise position of the planets in two charts, one on top of the other. I know if you're South Indian, because the trouble, you can't draw this circle on top of a South Indian chart. I do have a South Indian biwheel that will show this quite well, but the North Indian biwheel, which is what this is gives a little bit more precision. So we look at the two Atmakarakas. You see, her Atmakaraka is Jupiter, and it's at 29 degrees of Capricorn. And we go over to 29 degrees of Cancer, and we find his Atmakaraka. So it's a perfect example. So who would think, just the first one I picked. That's it. Whatever, different psychology, drama, there's a lot of drama if you're married to a queen. I mean, because she's the boss. By all standards, you have nothing much to say about it. So they thought, well, what about Victoria and Albert? Because think about these royal charts, we have very precise birth times. So, we know Victoria and Albert have had a very deep relationship, though he had similar problems to Philip, of course. Any man would in such a situation. So here, you see, we don't have that direct opposite. If there's a direct opposite with the Atmakarakas, it's a phenomenal thing. And even if the sun is directly opposite, or you have a conjunction, it's also fantastic. But here we have a case where the two Atmakarakas in a trine. Trine is good, you see. So he's got Venus Atmakaraka, and over here in Pisces, she's got Mars. So we can start by saying these are in trine, but there's so much more to it, because he's got Mars in Pisces and she's got Venus in Pisces Navamsha. And both of them, the most striking connection in this chart is the two Jupiters on top of each other, pretty close to on top of each other in Capricorn. So, it's all being held together by Pisces, and Pisces is dependent on Jupiter, and Jupiter's clamping them together, but it's debilitated. So maybe we could, if we did a big study of these charts, we'd come to some conclusions about why the relationship was relatively short. But if we take just this, we see that they're going to hang together very firmly, but the chance of it going on forever is, it's not going to happen. So due to the debilitation, he died, and his early death threw her into a lifetime of mourning. It said she had some kind of a boyfriend later on, but she never came out of mourning, really. When you go to London, you see all the railings are painted black, and all the taxi cabs are black, and mostly all the official vehicles are black. And this was not the case before Albert died. They had beautiful coloured railings, fancy coloured coaches. There was no black. So the fact that, the heads of state of all the countries in the world feel they have to sit in a black car is all due to this. Just interesting observation, I think. So anyway, you can see very strong connection, but time limited. Something triggered the debilitation, and that was it. All right, so a little section on the mental health crisis. Small picture courtesy of Copilot. So mental health issues affect millions worldwide. We have to really face up to this fact that this is impacting people of all ages and backgrounds. It's not a small thing. I mean, look at all the farmers in India who commit suicide, young children committing suicide. It shouldn't happen. Why is it happening? But the fact is that there's so many toxic factors in our environment. There are 101 causes, but it's a very serious problem in the world today. And then mental health has always been a very big problem because people don't like to admit to it. I know lots of people with mental health problems. They're never going to see a doctor. They won't. They refuse to go. They just go on suffering because their pride, they don't want to get labeled. And if you get labeled, even the state may give you trouble. Start, taking your rights away or things. So it's a very big problem. If you have a physical diagnosis, everybody understands. You have a mental diagnosis, it's a severe disadvantage, which is all wrong, really. And then, so what you need is support systems, according to this. But it's true, you really do need support systems. And you need support practices. So it's not something which you shouldn't just be left to suffer. But it's up to people to, make some effort to get help for themselves. Now, if you're in India, you have this wonderful yogic tradition. And the fact is, if you do, like when I studied as a transcendental meditation teacher, and we were taught how to help people with chronic mental health problems. We weren't allowed to teach them TM, but we were told to give them asanas. I had this lady, she came, and she was way too far gone for meditation. So I said, you need to do some asanas. So she said, okay. She came every week for a couple of hours, and I gave her personal training in the asanas. And after a year, she was fantastic. Like all the symptoms she had largely subsided. And I said, now you can learn meditation. And she said, I don't need to meditate. I'm perfectly fine. And I never saw her again. Of course, she didn't pay 1 cent or paisa for all that work. But, I learned something from it. It does work. The asanas are incredibly beneficial. And once you start getting a bit more stabilized, a bit of pranayama, and then some yoga meditation, you'll be right and much improved. Why not become just like everybody else? So anyway, either you do something about the situation or it tends to deteriorate, which is not good. So we're going to see 1 or 2 examples here. So the World Health Organization has said we're facing a mental health pandemic. Pandemic means, you're basically getting it from other people and it spreads. So what does the doctors have to offer? They have counseling and drugs. Maybe they have some other things these days. But some doctors in the UK, USA, and other places are starting to use some mind-altering drugs like psilocybin, magic mushrooms. I'm not promoting these things. But see, the whole idea is basically sensible, because if you have something that sort of shifts your consciousness so that you have at least a momentary taste of some higher state, it often kind of fixes you. It's like you've seen that life is really worth living and has such potential that you don't even need to take the magic mushrooms more than once. So it's an incredible thing that should not be ignored by medicine. But this anti-drug thing runs deep. But of course, you don't have to take drugs to get a glimpse of higher consciousness. So I would much rather see that people take up some yogic practices. But whatever you do is at least some minutes every day should be spent just on yourself, caring for yourself through not sitting thinking, because that's pretty toxic, but just, the whole idea of japa. You just Om Namah Shivaya, but it has to be done slowly with full attention and a little gap in between. And gradually your whole mind comes under control. So it's not, so I'm not trying to teach it now, but it's something that one can take up until you find a guru to teach you properly. This is the tradition in India. You pick up one of these, what they call Prasiddha mantras, which don't need special initiation, and you do it until you find the guru who can give you something tuned to yourself. So here's a very brilliant lady, Sylvia Plath. She was an author, and she married another famous author called Ted Hughes. I don't know if you ever studied English and American literature, you may have heard of them. But it's a terribly sad case, because she has Rahu in the ascendant. It's a strong Rahu, but it's still Rahu in the ascendant. Moon is in the 8th house, which is particularly difficult. And we could find quite a few problems with this chart. And the Navamsha chart is more difficult. So I wasn't planning to spend time dwelling on the source of the problems, but the thing is that her mental health problems were continuously troubling her. And when Ted Hughes, she found that he was having an affair, she killed herself. She gassed herself, in fact. So, Rahu, it's a very sad thing. It just shows the mental health went untreated, as it sometimes does, you see, and the consequence can be loss of life. Here's another brilliant author, British author, Virginia Woolf. And you can, if you study her chart, you can see the sort of book she wrote, but she was a very good author and she became famous. Most people in England have heard of her, even though she was born in the 19th century. And you see again the nodes on the axis and the moon in a Dushtana with Saturn. It's pretty bad. And in her case, you see, she was doing quite well. She was quite recognized, and her marriage was good. And one day she wrote a note to her husband saying, "It's not your fault. You've been the best possible husband, but I think I'm causing you too much trouble." And she went and filled her pockets with stones and jumped in the river. So it's a sad case. You see, mental health needs to be addressed. I heard a story of this is from Hyderabad. There was some well-known lady who was anchor on the TV. She threw herself off a balcony And she left a note saying it's not anybody's fault, but my brain is killing me, basically. And it's not a brain, it's all the thought process. And Virginia Woolf, I think she was the one, or Sylvia Plath, she says it's like talons clawing at my heart. It's just the mental apparatus is too dysfunctional. And so they couldn't, they put up with it for quite many years, and eventually it just became intolerable. So I'm putting Sadhguru's chart here. I mean, of course, he offers a fantastic yoga program, and it's fantastic, really. It's so systematic, and the asanas and the pranayama and some meditation. It's anyway, I think it's fantastic. But the reason why I put this here is because I can't end with Virginia Woolf and Sylvia Plath. And if you look at this chart, the moon is completely unafflicted, at least in the Rashi chart. You see, there's no malefic aspects at all. And that's Graha Drishti. And the only Rashi Drishti is Jupiter and Venus. So no wonder he's a happy chap. It's like he says that I don't give permission. He has plenty of abuse to cope with. Like, there's a lot of people with very shady motives who are trying to ruin his work. But he said, I don't give permission to anyone to spoil my happiness, So because he's on that level, he can control his mind. And the thing is that if a mind isn't busy all the time, it's just quiet. It doesn't matter what anybody says, because you're just in the wholeness of bliss. So let them say what they will, really. It's a very remarkable chart, really. So this is my last slide. I made this with a little help from the AI, but I couldn't get the AI to do exactly what I wanted. But eventually I managed to tweak it myself. And the whole idea is that basically we have a choice. The world is heading towards destruction. And we keep supposedly saying, oh, there's hope, there's hope. But we don't see anybody doing much about it. Yeah, the Indian government has tried quite hard. Even the Chinese government's doing something. America's going backwards. But basically, nobody's doing what needs to be done. And on an individual level, and the national level, and the global level. So really, we have two choices. We can continue with business as usual, which is definitely in a dark black hole. And all the things we're relying on for career and all that is going to go into the black hole. Or we can continue with career and all that, but we take the yogic path, which is the beautiful shiny thing on the right, and our life will blossom, whatever. There will be inconveniences, things will be difficult, but that inner joy will make it all really worthwhile. So I have some speculation about AI and all that, but that's not the point. The point here is Sadhguru has a nice app called Miracle of Mind. So if it's free and it's on the app stores, and if you want to, you want a little bit of help for a very small amount of time, people say it really works. So you can try it out. So that's my talk. And let's see, are there any questions? When you're talking to a screen, you don't know if anybody's still listening. Hopefully there's somebody there. Well, if there are no questions, we can wrap up here. Thank you very much for attending, those of you who are out there. And thank you very much to the Raman family, and all the other people, Akila, Dr. Akila, and all those people who've put the effort in to make this happen, which is much appreciated.
So that was an enlightening presentation on the most complex topic, exploring consciousness through Jyotisha. Let's now invite our audience to participate in a question answer session. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat box. We will make sure every effort to address as many questions as time permits. The questions will be displayed on the screen now. Please do read the questions and the person's name as well before you answer the question.
Sorry, I'm rather sunburnt. I was in Kedarnath a few days ago and trekking through in the heat and the sun, the strong UVs kind of cooked me. So anyway, it was a fantastic experience. Okay, if Chara Atmakaraka conjunction with Sun as natural Saratma Karaka in the D9 chart, how it helps in spiritual sadhana. Well, I think any connection between Atmakaraka and the Sun is good. D1, D9, D60. You have to see if the person's doing any sadhana. If they're doing sadhana, then it's obviously helping them. If they're not doing it, then perhaps it isn't. Because it depends on where it is in the chart and is it connected to the lagna? This is very important because we're only really doing things that are connected to the lagna, especially the D1 lagna. That's showing what we're doing. Otherwise it's somebody else in our life who's doing it. See? But basically it's a good connection. Please share our understanding of how the Aruda portrays the interplay between Ahankara, Chitta, and Charakarakas in shaping how we appear versus who we truly are. Yeah, the Aruda is how we appear, as you say, is exactly correct. It's just an appearance. It's not the truth at all, you see. So now from any lagna, we can study all the points in the chart. Now the rules for the yogas may be a little bit different, but everything has to be seen with reference to the lagna we're studying. Everything to do with the appearance is being seen in different places from the Aruda lagna. And, the Aruda lagnas, the Karaka for the Aruda lagna is the moon, while the Karaka for the lagna, the Udaya lagna, is the sun. So this is the principal difference. That's why the Udaya lagna is Satyam, truth, and the Aruda is Sansara, it's the moon. We're grateful to the moon and to the Sansara, but, it's easy to get lost in it. So, I don't have a chart to look at, so I can only make some general statements. But you see, there are lots of, we study different things in different charts. Like the Atmakaraka is usually studied in the Navamsha chart, and then its position relative to the lagna is very important. It shows us, what kind of life we're going to have and so forth. Oh, it's a long topic.
Those were some very good questions. With that, we wrap up our question answer session. I'd like to offer a heartfelt thanks to each of you for your active participation and insightful questions. Your participation is important and has enhanced our discussion. On behalf of everyone, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to you, sir, for imparting your invaluable knowledge and deep expertise. As we conclude today's session, I want to remind you that this is just one of many sessions we have planned in our Vedic Astrology Masterclass series. Our next session will be held on 1st of November 2025 by Srimati Lalita Donatella Rebek. And the masterclass topic is Moons, Nakshatra and Careers. We look forward to another enlightening experience and hope you'll join us again. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep pushing the boundaries of your knowledge.